And now here's part 2 of our episode. Okay, so you talked about why that is the standout track, that it takes you away. It's just a short album, like it's like 45 minutes. There's not, there's not a bit of fat on it, is there?
This is back in the day, though, when they were making albums. Albums didn't go that long. This was a record album, 1959. Now you could get 60 minutes of music or whatever. So this was standard. This actually might be a little bit long for a record album.
Okay, that's fair.
I will tell you two interesting tidbits about the album. And again, this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but so one is that the first 3 tracks of the album they recorded it on tape decks, and the first 3 tracks of the album were recorded on a tape deck that was at the wrong speed. It played slower, so that when they discovered that the backup tape deck that they had, and they discovered it, this CD that I've brought is a recording of the right speed. And so it's a slightly different sharp, or is it sharper? One's sharper than the other. I don't know what it is, but one's slightly sharp. You'd have to really be a musician. I mean, I've played the album and the CD to try to catch it, and you can kind of hear it, but it's an interesting tidbit about the album. The other thing is the second side of the album. Again, it's an album, has 2 sides on CD. The 2 tracks on the second side are all blues and flamenco sketches. Yeah. And the theory is that they actually reversed the track names. If you look on the album, the track names are reversed than the way that they are in the if you look online or you see on the CD. Yeah. But if you open that up and pull the album out, it's listed properly. So it's a really weird, but I've read an article about this because I was like, oh, this is weird. I didn't notice it until I saw it. And there is another take on that CD, which is the only other take that they had. Apparently they did one take, no rehearsals, did one full take of each of the songs and printed it. Wow. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Only wow.
Yeah.
It's just so funny to be talking about so many artists who spend weeks in the studio trying to perfect something. Mm-hmm. I did not know that aspect about this album.
Yeah. And it was pretty. I think if I'm filling in here, it was pretty kind of explosive in terms of the inspiration. It sounds like this kind of came. Miles was pretty prescriptive about how it was going to go down. He didn't give them much in advance.
Well, modal. So modal is like a scale. So rather than chord structure, it was a scale structure. And he gave them this idea of this scale structure and said, this is how we're going to go about doing this track. And Bill Evans had a big hand in some of this. I don't think he's credited, but he is actually the co-writer of Blue and Green. Yeah. As well as, I believe, flamenco sketches. Well, it's unclear. Flamenco sketches are all blues because they're not sure which title is which. But one of those 2 tracks has an intro in it that comes from a song that Bill Evans has on another album of his, and a song called Peace, Peace.
Peace, yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to point out on the back of the album here, something you wouldn't get from looking at anything else other than the album. There's a little star next to one of the things that says that Julian Adderley, who played alto sax, it says Julian Adderley lays out on Blue and Green, Win Kelly only on Freddie Freeloader, Bill Evans on all other tracks. I just look lays out.
Cannonball Adderley. There you go. The Cannonball. Peace, incredible song.
Yes.
Big Bill Evans fan.
Oh, great.
I like Bill Evans a lot.
Yeah. So he was in the Miles Davis band, and then was leaving during the time that this was being recorded, and thus the reason why Wynton Kelly came in for one song, because he was going to be the new piano player, and he plays on Freddie Freeloader.
So, Michael, you listen to more than just Miles Davis when it comes to jazz, yes, I'm assuming? Yes. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, for those out there, we joke about this on the podcast sometimes. Well, I joke because Tyler is developing an appreciation for jazz right now, but I like to joke sometimes. For the people who say that jazz is just someone trying to find the note, what would you tell them? I guess sort of what is the thing that brings all jazz music together and that would help people who aren't accustomed to listening to it? How do you what's the way to listen to jazz as opposed to something that's more, with like a verse, chorus, verse structure?
Well, I guess to me, it seems like the answer is really obvious. It's improvisation. And who doesn't love to go see an improv comedy or an improv show, right?
Depends on the troupe.
Oh, good point. Good point. Well, I guess I would say, listen to this album. And if you walk away and you don't understand what's going on here, it is so, again, and I tend to gravitate more towards melodic kind of rather than freeform jazz.
Yeah.
But it's just so beautiful. Blue and Green is one of the most beautiful songs ever recorded.
Yeah.
It is so beautiful. And it's improvised. So like you watch a improvisation troupe and wow, you go and see a group and you're like, wow, they were really amazing. They were just really on fire. They were really together that night. The next night they might be shit.
Yeah.
but they really came together.
Yeah. The building blocks are there.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a good answer. That's
Yeah.
a good. Yeah. That's a really, because I do think jazz represents a specific container for musical improvisation in all of the rest of music. Yeah. Right. So I appreciate that. I appreciate that argument. Though.
Well, and you've also worked in improv.
I have, yes.
Yes, and so
a dabble.
Yes. Well, as a matter of fact, with my wife.
Yes.
So yes, exactly. So
Jenny Avery. Let's just shout it out right now. Michael's wife, Jenny Avery, a formative figure in my theater education. The very first class that I took at the theater school at DePaul University was taught by Jenny. It was improv. It was great. Still hold it very close to my heart. So, love you, Jenny. Yes, I'm going to come see you in Portugal.
So I guess I would say, like, when I was teaching here at Cherubs, and we would dabble in some improvisation, or I talk to students about it. Oftentimes, you'd see this look over their faces, like, "Oh my God, oh no!" The fear that would come up before them. We're having an improvisation right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yep.
It's about having you. Yes, we associate improvisation with comedy, and everyone thinks it has to be funny, but that's not necessarily true.
Yeah.
We're having a great improvisation right now, and who knows where it's going to go. But I think that's the same thing with the music. Like, you don't know where it's going to go, but if you kind of get in there somewhere, you find an opening and just allow yourself to be taken by it, like a good improvisation troupe. You can just go with the flow, go with it, and they'll take you away.
Yeah. Yeah, there's got to be some agreement. You can tell.
Exactly.
You can
yes
tell,
and.
Yes. Yeah, it's yes and. And I think that when we're talking, like I think there's been plenty of music theory on this episode already, but like I would encourage everybody to sort of go watch one of these YouTube videos about what is modal jazz, because it's sort of hard to wrap your mind around when you're just speaking about it. But when you think about, there's this idea of vertical versus horizontal, and how the chords and scales sort of intersect in that way.
Yeah.
And I think when you can kind of hear the difference, it becomes clear to you why the possibilities become endless with this modal jazz idea. So it's very exciting. I think we should move on from the music theory, probably, because
I thought you covered that very well. That's great.
It's all in there. It's all in there.
Yeah. Well, we asked you to provide us with albums that you believed were perfect. I believe you gave us 2 different lists. If I'm not mistaken. Which is not the most we've had. I will say someone did give us a list of 11. I think maybe it was 11 at one point.
Yeah.
Okay. We say 3 or 4, but whatever. So just curious, when you were coming up with that list, what were your standards for perfection? How did you define it?
Well, that's a really great question. I mean, one thing I have to admit that I went and listened to some and looked at your podcasts and was, sort of curious as to what people thought of different albums. And there are obviously quite a few on there that I would go, oh my God, yes, of course. David Bowie and Talking Heads, and but I didn't see any jazz.
True.
And I listen to so much jazz that I just it's such an underappreciated music now. It was obviously very big in its time, in Miles's time, in Miles's early time, and I guess later time as well. But that I was thinking about genres, to be specific of what kinds of things because I listen again to a lot of music. The only that I don't listen to very much is country music.
Sure.
It just doesn't move me.
Also underrepresented on our podcast right now.
Yeah. I mean, I do like Hank Williams and Patsy Cline and some of the old school stuff, but it's not something I would pick up and go and listen to. I do have some of those Hank Williams and Patsy Cline, but I rarely listen to that. But anyway, so I was thinking about that, and then the other, and we could talk a little bit about this. The other person that I thought about that wasn't on the list, and that really to me is monumental in my listening, was Tom Waits,
the man himself.
Yeah, and not just because I was in a musical with him.
I say go in on it. Go in on it. We knew you were holding on to this one. Just name drop Prince. Just name drop Tom Waits. Okay, Michael. But so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I worked with Steppenwolf Theater Company long ago, and they were going to do this musical that Tom Waits had put together called Frank's Wild Years, which was one of my favorite albums, favorite songs. And I went to high school with some of these guys. They were at Highland Park High School. I was at Waukegan High School. And so we competed against each other in speech contests and stuff. And that's kind of how I knew them. And then I had my own ensemble company, which was sort of like, oh, well, Steppenwolf can do it. We can do it. Of course, we couldn't do it like they did it. I did shows there at Steppenwolf. I did a number of shows with them. And then they asked me to be in the show. And then before we even got to the first rehearsals, they were doing some readings with Tom, and he was in town. And I think it was a night when it was Gary Cole, who's an old roommate of mine, who was supposed to be playing this particular part, and he couldn't come to the reading that night. So they asked me to read it, and it was the part in the play that actually read the song Frank's Wild Years.
Great. So
here I am at this rehearsal, sitting next to Tom Waits, who's like my idol. I just love. So the other part of this, it's like his music is so theatrical.
Yeah,
it's just so theatrical. And he was doing a theatrical piece. How great! And this piece, Frank's Wild Years itself, was so theatrical. He's such an amazing storyteller. And I had to read that sitting next to Tom Waits. I was so nervous.
Oh man.
And it was great. It turned out great. I mean, obviously I didn't play that role. Gary played that role. And then I played various roles in the musical, but it had a very
I played various roles too.
It had a very troubling genesis, because originally Terry Kenny was directing, and we were in, second week of rehearsal or something, and it was just not, he couldn't figure out where it was going, and he was frustrated, and they were frustrated, and somehow a few weeks into it, he stepped down and Gary Sinise came in and directed it. But I got to tell you, this one day at rehearsal. So we were rehearsing in the old Steppenwolf space on Halsted Street, which was the old St. Nicholas Theater space.
Yep.
On the third floor, I think, or was it a fourth floor? I don't know. The top floor, we were rehearsing up there, and the offices were on the floor below us. So we're rehearsing, and every now and then Tom would get up, and we'd be doing lines and doing this stuff, and Tom would get up and when we'd come to a song, and occasionally he would sing it. Sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't. Well, he'd come up to this song. We come up to the train song, which, if you don't know it, go listen to it. It is gut-wrenching. It is a beautiful, gut-wrenching song. There's this old beat-up piano back in the corner of the room. We come up to this train song. Tom walks over to the piano with his crooked, dangling fingers, jams down on the piano, and wails the train song. I can feel it, right? And I can feel how it felt in the room that moment. I can't describe that moment. There was nothing like it. You could feel the emotion coming out of the piano, out of his hands, out of his voice. It's like time stood still. People from the offices down the floor below came up the stairs and stood and watched and listened. It was an amazing moment. It was just incredible. And then, of course, we did the musical, and it was sold out for, I don't know, 8 weeks, 8 shows a week for 8 weeks. And it was supposed to go to Broadway, which was like, really? Tom Waits on Broadway? I couldn't quite understand that, but it was wonderful to be a part of.
What a special thing. Was he a positive spirit? Was he like a sweet guy?
We used to call him Mr. Adlib, because he was like, he could come up with stuff like you wouldn't believe. His mind was so fertile. I mean, you can see how he comes up with his stories for his songs.
I love Tom Waits.
He was like that, just talking to him. It was just amazing. He was a great guy.
So taking this idea of like what these, because you've talked about the emotional. You've talked about something taking you on an emotional ride, right?
Yeah.
You've talked about theatricality. You've talked about transportation. These are all. And you're invoking ideas that we've talked about, that we've had great conversations with people about. So is this where the perfection lies? I guess yes. So with this album, is it the elevation? Is it that it elevates your experience in some way?
It takes you on an emotional journey. I mean, it could be very elevated. Like there's not rousing choruses, I mean, there's certainly some solos in there that will take you away.
Yeah.
But it takes you, every track on the album takes you someplace, takes you on an emotional journey somewhere. And that I find to be the reason why this album is just the best, is 11, or it's past 11. It's past 11. Yeah.
So for those of you who are, what just happened just now that we just cut out, is that Michael and I just discussed what we're going to do next. You're getting a little peek behind the curtain. And basically my conclusion is that we're going to have Michael Fosberg back for another episode, because there's just too much to talk about, and we're really trying to keep these things tight. So I think it's time to go to deliberation time, isn't it? To see how he did.
I think so. And but the fact that you mentioned Tom Waits, like I feel like there's a glimmer in Tyler's eye, like he wants to talk to you about Tom Waits even more.
Yes, well, I have other things I want to talk about. But anyway, all right. Thus begins the deliberation period.
Da, da, da. I'm trying.
We're going to develop a sound.
We're freaking out a sound.
Okay.
Yeah. That was bad.
Okay, so you first. How in terms of this case, and how strongly was it built?
I mean, I got to be honest. On the past 3 episodes, dear listeners, I tried to take notes along the way, but I was lost in Michael's storytelling abilities. So I jotted down nothing. So I have to. I'm trying to think of like something specific. I mean, I think the thing for me is that when I asked you to sort of explain jazz to people who just say it, just find the note.
Yeah.
Like the succinctness with which you did that, and the way that connects to everything you've said thus far about Miles Davis and this album.
Yeah.
For me, that feels like, if I were grading your paper as the professor that I am, you have satisfied all the aspects of the rubric.
Yeah.
This is I would defy my rule, which is I almost never give 100. Yeah. For a writing assignment, but I think I would make an exception for your case.
And you know what's crazy about that, though, is that I don't know how, we've never discussed this on a pedagogical level, right? But even if somebody satisfies all of the rubric items, right, there's still room for a piece of writing to transcend that, right? There's still room for something being greater than the sum of its parts, right?
Yeah.
Which I also think is something that I recognized as a through line on your case for this, because I think it's that not only is it sort of like the definitive jazz album, like it being the best-selling jazz album of all time and like the most popular one, the most ubiquitous one perhaps, but it does something beyond that, right? Like it captures that ineffable thing that we are all kind of looking for, and the thing that we're trying to articulate on this podcast. So I think you mentioned it's the soundtrack, how it's the soundtrack of your life, how it takes you on an emotional journey, even if it's a quiet emotional journey, like the different scales at which that can happen. I mean, all of these things all these things are adding up to be more than 100%,
Mhm.
perhaps even 1100%. So you've handed me the baton for the last
Oh, I
few,
guess
because
I have.
I have 6 seasons of handing you the baton
That's
at
true.
the last minute. But for old time's sake,
Yes.
I think I have to put it to you,
Okay.
Michael,
Yes.
my friend.
Yes.
How has Michael Fosberg done making his case for the perfection of Miles Davis's Kind of Blue? Is it perfect? Does it go to 11?
Just listen to what you just said. Has he made a case for this being a perfect? Yes. This goes to 11. We're not going to turn this down. We're not going to say, I don't know.
We won't.
Yeah.
Jeez. Oh man. I feel like I got so much like Midwest cool. That's what this one is. If cool jazz is Miles Davis's thing, then Michael Fosberg's thing is Midwest cool. That's what
That's cool. I'll take it. Yeah.
Yeah. This is. I mean, this is again one of those albums that we were waiting for.
we were.
Yeah, and we're glad you were the one to deliver it to us.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I looked at the list and or the podcast and saw that there was no jazz on there, first of all.
Yeah.
And this being, I mean, I actually almost didn't choose this and was going to choose another. Well, I did choose another jazz album on there,
Yes,
Sonny
I know.
Rollins' Saxophone Colossus. But there are another handful of jazz albums that I could think of that I really, really listen to a lot. But for my money, and for obviously a lot of people's money, this album, there's a reason.
Yeah.
It is it's considered the definitive jazz album.
It's sort of like gone beyond cliche and come back around into just being authentically one of the greatest pieces.
Absolutely. That's a great word to use with it. It's authentically what it is. Yes.
Oh, well said, man. What a pleasure. Great to meet you in person.
Yes.
This has been a treat.
Delightful.
And we want to give you a moment to plug anything you want to plug.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah. So I also have a podcast. We've talked about this at the top. I have a podcast called Authenticity, Belonging, Community.
Hell yeah.
The work that Michael talked about in my bio, going out and trying to get people to have more meaningful conversations about race and identity. I do that with corporations and government agencies and schools all across the country. The idea for the podcast is that I'm interviewing people from all different disciplines and fields to talk about how they go about bringing people together to make them feel like they're in an included, in an inclusive environment and feel like they belong. And so I have 7 seasons of the podcast. You can get it at wherever you download your podcasts. Authenticity, Belonging, Community.
Do that, people.
Yes.
Do that. And
maybe we'll put a link to it.
Maybe we'll put you just don't tempt me with a good time. Okay? We'll put a link and go listen to Kind of Blue, because this may be the first jazz album that we've properly talked about on the pod, but I don't anticipate it'll be the last. And
you've opened the door.
Yeah.
Future guests might be like, oh, okay, they'll talk about jazz.
There's just acres and acres, miles and miles of
miles.
Yeah. No pun intended there.
There we go.
Well, that was a pretty great conversation with Michael.
Yes, I would agree. It was a really good one.
Yeah. We've been waiting to talk about Miles Davis for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And he delivered.
Yes, he did.
Yeah.
But we just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of loop back around. We're adding this as a PS to all of you. Michael's no longer here, but we wanted to address the fact that earlier in the episode, Michael Fosberg mentioned Miles Davis's history of domestic violence. We talked a little bit about his addiction, and we didn't really come back around to those things. So we wanted to just take a moment and touch back on that for you all.
Yeah, it's sort of an ongoing struggle. I don't know. I don't know if I would call it a struggle per se, but something that as we are covering more and more artists and albums, sometimes it becomes difficult to separate the artist from the art. Can you actually do that? It's kind of unclear. I think, Tyler, there is a major album we have not covered yet, Michael Jackson's Thriller, that we've been wanting to talk about, but also terribly afraid of how to talk about it. And I think we have to do a lot of prep work for that.
Just to do it and all of that. The reason that there is that sort of feeling on this side of the microphone is because this whole project is kind of about doing these things with care, doing these things with intention. Really, if you've listened to the podcast, you know that it's not so much about the artist. It's more about the person that we're talking to. But we do believe that if we're going to talk about these things in a public forum, that it's kind of our responsibility to speak frankly and considerately about those important aspects of an artist's history, right?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, what do you think, Tyler? Can you actually separate the music from the musician?
I think probably not, but I don't think it's necessarily black or white. It never is, and so that leads to great opportunity to discuss how we appreciate an artist's art, and that goes across media and what our responsibility is towards maybe holding them accountable. There are economic levers that are relevant in this. There are social, intersectional kind of things that are at play as well. So I guess my hope is that we'll talk about any and all albums, and that we'll talk about them in the true context in which they exist, to maybe paraphrase someone who is running for president.
Who are you talking about?
I have no idea. What about you? What do you think?
I mean, I think that, are there some fantastic songs on Michael Jackson's Thriller?
Oh, yeah.
Of course. Do I enjoy listening to them? Yes. Can I still enjoy them? I think we can still enjoy the music. We just also have to have that little thing in the back of our brain, acknowledging, his legal history and all the acts which I still think to this day are technically alleged acts, but there's a lot of evidence against him. And I mean, in the case of Miles Davis, like, we know the things that he did, but he also has created the greatest, the best-selling jazz album of all time. Very enjoyable. I think that it's sort of cognitive dissonance, right? Like, we have to be able to hold those two things in our head at the same time. We can enjoy the music on a very emotional, spiritual level. We can also intellectually say that guy kind of sucked, right? Yeah. And that's, I think, both unfortunately can be true, or fortunately, I don't know.
Yeah, I think at the core of it, what we need to just acknowledge is that it doesn't matter who you are, that domestic violence is an issue from top to bottom in society, and there's lots of really a lot smarter people out there than us who can speak with some intelligence as to kind of like how pervasive it is and what we as people can do about it. And not like this project needs to necessarily be about that, but I do think that if we come across these topics, then it's something that we shouldn't shy away from.
Yeah. So, dear listeners, we didn't want you to think we were totally ignoring that. I mean, Michael said that very early in the episode, and we weren't just going to let it drop entirely. So
totally.
So yeah.
And if you maybe this goes without saying, but if you or anyone is experiencing something related to domestic violence, we hope that you will reach out for help and do what is necessary to lean on those who support you. And I think I speak for both of us when I say that we support you doing what you need to take care of yourselves out there.
You do speak for both of us, most definitely. Yeah. Well, Tyler, this is the last of our 4 episodes.
I'm touching your shoulder right now.
That's how we started the first episode together.
Symmetry, baby. Symmetry.
Yeah, the last one we're recording together in the same room in beautiful Rosemont, Illinois. Well, we're in Rosemont. Most of the things we recorded were in Chicago. But this point forward, we're back to the Zoom room.
For now.
Yeah.
For now. Yeah, so this is the last of the in-person episodes, and we hope you're enjoying them and that you're going to enjoy the rest of the season. And we've got bigger and better things to come, people.
Most definitely. So if you are not doing so already, please follow us on Spotify or Apple Music, or subscribe to our YouTube channel, or find us and follow us on social media. We got an Instagram, we got Facebook, and we even got TikTok.
Yeah, we're going to try this TikTok thing. I don't know if you guys have heard of it.
Yeah, get ready for some ultimate cringe, y'all. Yeah. I mean, like, capital C cringe.
Capital Ringe.
Capital Ringe. It's all capital. It's all cringe all the time.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Much love, everybody. Talk to you soon.
Bye.